me.
No, I'm excited to have you, man, because last time it was all, anarchism and politics and all that sort of uh, stuff that just devolves into a bunch of unfruitful conversations with most people online. So I'm picking a different topic now. I saw you going back and forth with one of my mutuals about the existence of God and all the things that come along with that. So we'll try to delve into a less controversial topic like God. Let's do it.
Sure, let's go for it.
So cool. So I'm gonna start off with what was the problem you have with the mutual you got into it with? What do you take umbrage with? Because it seems like you're pretty upset with him about the way he went around, or managing his arguments, his account and stuff. And so what's the major problem?
Sure. Yeah, just to speak in more of a general way since he's not here to defend himself, there's a lot of accounts online that will take advantage of this sort of new cultural surge towards, uh, Christianity as this sort of, strongman, form of stability, yet still framed as a counterculture movement of like, okay, I'm counterculture now. I want to have a family. I want to have just like a man and a woman, like live on a
Trad
farm.
con thing.
Yeah, it's like there's nothing cool about being counterculture for the sake of counterculture, whether it's one way or the other. And this new trend of being like, well, I'm counterculture because this, it's taking advantage of this sort of movement of like, do you want stability in your life? Do you want to have this grounding that you can stand on that other people don't have? Like, come on over to Christianity. And the what's inherent in a faith-based system is that it is not going to have very solid ground to stand on. By the nature of it, it relies on faith. I
So
don't have a
you what you mean? Sorry, just to interrupt, but I think what you mean is ontologically speaking.
yeah,
Yeah.
ontologically speaking, that just is what it is, and I don't think that's necessarily a problem, just, like, accept that for what it is. That people don't like that, understandably so, there's a reason why I'm not religious, but there's this insecurity that can fester that will lead people to trying to find ways to justify things or at least take the battle elsewhere. And a lot of that is a projection onto atheists exactly what they themselves are struggling with internally. And you see this all the time with these accounts that are framed as like used to be an atheist, now I'm a Christian, so it has that clout baked in of like, ooh, he's a reformed of one of those, so he has the authority to speak about what those people actually think, and then proceed to just project that insecurity outward and claim everything under the sun built from this straw man of not what any atheist thinks, and they know this, whether they were an actual atheist or not, they know what they're doing to bait atheists in to go, "Oh, that's not what I think." And then that brings in a ton of engagement, which tend to try to avoid, because that's exactly what they're looking for.
Right, right.
And then they can just do their normal trying to, uh, bait the atheist into something like, "Oh, like, you have an opinion about something? What's your worldview based on? Like, it's not grounded in anything," and then there's no conversation that's had at all because the atheist is just dismissed off the bat, and then it's just a constant recycling of that, and it's frustrating to see. I tend to avoid it. I used to engage occasionally, and then I was just like, "This is there's nothing worthwhile here." But occasionally people will of that nature will just respond to me, and so I'll feel the need to reply back, but again, it's never productive. I shouldn't engage because there's nothing's gonna come out of it.
Yeah,
It's just infuriating.
that's fair, and I think that's the way it's intended. There's so many parallels with politics too. I think you get to the same paradigm. I was a Republican, I was a neocon, and now saw Ron Paul, and now I'm a libertarian. Like it's the same thing, or from the left, a similar type of thing, or transitioning from whatever group, in group to out group, or vice versa. So it's a pretty common paradigm. I agree. Do you
Yeah,
think
it's like
that?
the "I used to be a liberal" type shtick that, like,
Yeah, it
Dave
was like
Rubin has.
M
It but
Matt
they're
Matt
but
Von Swole. He's the new guy that I can think of. That was the I was a
and then at some
Democrat.
point, they become so far removed from their original upbringing that, like, everything they talk about, "Oh, liberals this, liberals that," it's like, you actually don't even know what they believe anymore. Like, you're not even making any points, and I think it's a very similar situation.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. So do you think there's value in talking about the question of whether gods exist or can exist, or the whole deist, theist, panentheist, atheist? Like, is there any point, do you think, for to have these type of discussions?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's value in having discussions about basically anything. This in particular, it's like the question, right? Like,
Seems to be.
yeah, like of course it's gonna be important. But people dedicate their entire lives to this, which is why, even from my perspective, it seems like it's very important because what such a belief requires from me is so radically different than what I'm currently doing that, of course, I wanna know if that is a true belief, because if it is, I'm doing everything wrong, and I don't wanna do everything wrong, but there needs to be good reason to believe that that belief is true, and I haven't encountered sufficient reason to believe that. Like, and that's to say, belief for what it is, I don't exactly have control over what I believe and what I don't believe. This is another straw man that's typically thrown out. It's like, okay, well, like atheists just want to go and sin without repercussion.
Every
So
time.
they,
That
so
argument's
they,
never late, man.
yeah, so they choose not to believe. It's like, okay, if belief is such a choice, do you think it's possible for you to just choose to believe that Santa Claus is real right now? Oh, well, I wouldn't. Like, of course he's not real. I wouldn't choose to believe that. It's like, okay, would it be possible? Could you just believe that Santa Claus could you just choose that? It's like, no, of course not. You can't you could pretend like it, but of course everyone knows it's not enough to pretend to believe in God. You have to actually believe in God. So, it's a moment where I've been presented with enough stuff, whatever it is, whether it's reasonable evidence, to whoever's standard, it doesn't matter. It's whatever has been presented to me or a thought process that I've had that makes something click in my mind that says, "Oh, I'm convinced now." Then I have no choice but to believe this, whether I say that I do or not. And so I'm, of course, relying on people externally to trust that when I say I am not convinced, that I'm not convinced. Um, but I'm unconvinced nonetheless, and I don't think that has anything to do with whether I want to be or not. The grieving mother can want to believe that her child didn't die in war, but, like, you can't just choose not to believe that. They show up and they have his casket, it's like, you can't control that, so I think that's always a ridiculous argument.
Yeah, it's
Also,
like we
I
all
wanna
we all have to bend to reality. Like we have to bow down to objectively reality as mediated by our senses. I don't think we have a choice. I don't think anyone has a choice, honestly.
if I wanted to that's the thing, if I wanna go sin without repercussion, I even if I was like, "Hey, I wanna not believe that God's real," but, like, he is actually real, going to sin, I'm still gonna face the repercussions whether I myself am convinced of its truth or not, so it's never been It's like, oh, they just don't want it to be on their conscience, I guess. I guess that's fine, but that's just as uncontrollable as, the initial, convincing of belief. So I've never understood that. I've always think that's such a problem. It's just a straw man. They look at the atheist and they go like, "How presumptuous of him to look at the same stuff that I look at and not be convinced of this thing that I'm convinced of." So they must just have this sort of ego going on. It's like, "I'm sorry, dude. Like, I'm not this isn't enough for me."
Yeah, and I'm in the boat where I wish I could. You know, I've had Tyler Tote. I don't know if you know who that is, but I've had him on my show, and like I talked to him about it. And I made the same claim to him. I was like, look, like I would love if this was just real and I could believe it was real. But I told him like it's like me looking up at the sky and saying, well, I actually believe that it's purple. And it's like, bro, it's
Yeah.
not purple. I can't make myself. It would be a lie, right? And so I'm in that conundrum now because I think that this goes back to kind of one of the reasons I want to have this conversation with you is that I think that there's value in having a religious belief, right? I think that number one, I had Dr. Lawrence Krauss on my show, who is like one of the most preeminent atheists in the world, and he believes, and I believe as well, that you can't not be religious as a human being. Like it's something that is baked in us. It's just a question of what you're religious about. People just kind of come up with stuff, and we kind of talk about wokeism. We think wokeism sort of sprung. It's like the sort of emergent religion that sort of popped up. Um, and so, in my view, it's kind of like, well, devil you know versus the devil you don't. And so I think, Christianity has played a lot of, there's a lot of good and a lot of bad that came with it, but ultimately it built the Western world that we live in. And some of the concepts that are, embedded in Christianity, like the, dignity of man because he has an immortal soul created in the image of God. I think those are powerful metaphors. And like Brett Weinstein says, something can be literally false, but metaphorically true. Like you'd be better off if you believed something that might be false. And so I struggle with this one, man. Like this feels like there's some utility in being religious, actually believing, and I see a lot of it too, particularly around. I think the most prominent example that comes to mind is the Epstein stuff, because I'm a sort of a victim of childhood sexual abuse. Everyone knows that that's listens to my show, and that Epstein thing really caused me to crash out. Like the scale of it, the depravity, the brutality of it. It's so heartbreaking for me. I'm a dad of 3 daughters, so just the whole thing breaks my brain. And there's comfort in like believing that there's some ultimate justice for these fuckheads, like that somehow they're gonna, that I think this concept of burning forever in hell, like that sort of causes people to be able to get through their day sometimes without that sort of ultimate justice, ultimate, whether that be reward if you're a good person, or if some sort of punishment if you're a bad person. I think it might help steer people's behavior. It's not obviously not rational ethics and something that people logically accept and follow. But if you have a fear-based thing, like you don't want to get on the wrong side of the creator of the universe, it might end up with better outcomes. I think that that's probably the case. And so this whole topic is a tough one for me.
Yeah, I definitely understand that perspective. Where it starts to fall short for me is that, okay, if it's better for civilization for to believe this thing that I personally don't think is true, what am I supposed to do? If I have
Mm.
kids, am I supposed to just teach them this thing that I don't think is true? Like, okay, it makes me feel like I'm not special, right? Like, I'm not this, like, enlightened fucking guy that has all the answers, but these people around me, they need to have this fear of hell or it's gonna get out of hand, but I don't. Like, I'm good. Like, I can be fine. I can create my own meaning without falling into this despair type of nihilism, but they can't. Like, they're not enlightened enough to do that. I don't have the sort of ego to do that to other people. Like, if I'm capable of doing this, they're also capable of doing this. Um,
I'm not so sure, and this is where I 'cause I don't it doesn't feel like ego to me, you know? It feels almost like the midwit meme. You know, it's like there's just people that are on different, cognitive strata. There's a bell curve to IQ, you know, and I think the ability for the average person, or even a slightly above average person, to operate with that sort of mental model and clarity of thought is going to be challenging. I'm not trying to denigrate people. Like it's almost like with politics too. I see there's a lot of the, like libertarians are great. Let's talk about monetary policy. Let's talk about inflation. Let's talk about non-interventionism and all these arguments, and like you've lost like 80% of the people already because they're not cognitively with you. They need like this TLDR version, or like a thought leader within their group to sort of tell them the bullet points of what to repeat, but they're not deep thinkers. And I think a lot of people in the world are not deep thinkers on standard issues. Now you're asking them about to be incredibly deep thinker about the most important issue in the world, and have that nuance. And it's difficult, and ethics does become challenging. I think it's unfair to say that, oh well, it's very simple to derive rational ethics objectively from some non-religious standpoint. I think it's an easier argument to make. I'm not saying it's more sound, but it's an easier argument to just say, well, the creator of the universe says, therefore you must, right? Like that's a very simple A to B that most people can understand. Where you start going, let's do this Cartesian radical skepticism, and let's go down to first principles, and what the minimum assumptions we must make, and then work your way up to self ownership. Like that's a complicated thing. The average guy is not going to be like, hey, show me your syllogism for for how to behave as a human being. I think it's a difficult case to make for most people. Most people aren't interested in it, and obviously we've evolved religions, and religions have sort of got this tribal aspect of it. The Jewish people have got their thing, and then Christianity and Islam. Like it's a big group and a tribe, and tribes are powerful, and all that symbology, all of the narratives, all that narrative structure, the stories that are embedded, those metaphors, like those are deep. It's really deep, and I think it's unwise to just dismiss them casually, like there's no power in there that sort of traps people into that. So I don't think I get what you're saying. Like it feels egoistic to be like, oh, I'm
Mhm.
so smart, but y'all dummies can't figure this out. But to some degree that's probably true.
Well, I think there's a problem that inevitably arises when it's assumed, okay, some people aren't able to grasp this more complex way of thinking. So this the simple way of thinking doesn't necessarily have to be the religious conclusion. It could just be a simpler way of thinking about ethics. The problem with framing it as the religious conclusion is, if this is untrue, or if there's not, from my perspective, there's not good reason to believe that it is true. Now we're priming people to this inherent submission that can easily be transferred elsewhere. And I made a post about this the other day that I think could be interesting to read here.
Yeah, go for it.
But I say, religion sits at the center of the liberty question because it trains the most intimate habit a person can learn: surrender. It asks for gratitude toward an author you never consented to, obedience to terms you never negotiated, and a lifelong rehearsal of praise for an arrangement you had no power to refuse. People talk about freedom as if it lives out there in courts, ballots, protests, borders. Meanwhile, a far older regime operates inside the skull, treating thought as supervised, desire as suspect, doubt is dangerous, worth is conditional, access to peace is something granted rather than owned. And religion endures because it resolves anxiety cheaply. It answers questions before they fully form and assigns purpose without risk, and converts uncertainty into duty. And that trade feels humane to many people. It reveals the pressure of authorship, but relief purchased through surrender still trains the same reflex: defer first, obey inwardly, and trust the structure over the self. It recruits your relationships as enforcement. Approval becomes conditional, doubt becomes betrayal, belonging becomes a leash, and the cost of honesty rises with every person you love. A person can flee a country, they can change jobs, languages, neighborhoods, even names, but a cosmic monarchy offers no exit, only deeper submission. So the promised paradise reads as a perfected obedience, endless affirmation, endless gratitude, with no meaningful right of refusal. Certainty feels safer than responsibility. Permission feels easier than agency. A supervising gaze feels comforting to anyone trained to distrust their own solitude. The struggle for liberty begins with rejecting internalized authority because every external tyrant benefits from minds already practiced in reverence. A mind trained to kneel is easier to steer. A mind that demands evidence, protects doubt, and keeps its dignity intact in the presence of the sacred becomes difficult to govern through fear, shame, or reward. Therefore, throwing off religion becomes rehearsal space for freedom itself, quiet, private, decisive, and honest. And I stand by all of that. It's like, look, it's one thing if it's true, right? Like you can't. If it's there, it's there, whatever. But we're not operating there. We're operating in a place where, okay, this theory exists, and in order to believe it, it rests on faith. And if you're not comfortable just believing something on faith, it's worth it to dissect that and think, okay, who exactly is this serving? And if this isn't true, then it's serving whoever the authors of such a thing are, whatever institutions use this to their advantage. Even if you, oh, well, I don't believe in organized religion. I this is personal for me. It's like, okay, where did it come from? Like ultimately, you got this idea from somebody. You're telling me that like just upon introspection alone, you came to the conclusion that the Christian God of the Bible is the correct one. It's like, no, you were taught this. You read the scripture from the Bible. Maybe you don't like what some churches do, but ultimately you are at the behest of the same belief system as the other people that do buy into that. So you've essentially primed yourself to this submission, to this surrender, to again, like I said, something that you did not consent to, something that you didn't choose, and then you're expected to praise that arrangement that you have no power to refuse in the first place because you believe that that's true. Like you don't exactly get to refuse that, but you're expected to worship this. You can't just walk out of there. I mean, like,
Well, not only that, not just worship, but you have a duty to proselytize and give your money to the church too. There's always that money hook in there. It's like, hey, you're going to give us our cut. It's just like taxes, right? There's so many parallels between these religions and government. It's shocking.
so it to me, it's not like the argument that like, okay, this is a preferred situation than these people who maybe don't have the proper IQ to get to where I'm at, need this religion to steer them in the right direction. I don't buy this. Um, I think it essentially primes them to be manipulated in the worst way possible. It wouldn't be a huge deal if, just so and so had this personal belief and they lived their life in a way that didn't hurt me and great. We don't we live in a society where people interact with each other. These people have the same voting rights as I do. These people have um they can watch the same things that I do. They can be manipulated by the same things that try to manipulate me. They could be used as cannon fodder for the projects of tyrants. And if I mean, people like Larkin Rose will describe the state and the belief in political authority as the greatest superstition because that's what it is. If people are already primed to believe in such superstitions that may not have as a direct practical effect as the belief in political authority does, they're still ready to go, and we see this whether Adolf Hitler was actually a Christian or not, that doesn't matter, but he certainly used that to his advantage. Having Christian verses, printed on and used for Nazi propaganda and on the gear that soldiers wore in the war. There's it's useful behind that because they've created this immovable object that they know that, okay, well, the creator of the universe is this is how you gotta do it. These people aren't swayed by arguments. This is okay, we can have a conversation about the potential ills of abortion or something like this. And if my value structure or my sense of right and wrong isn't grounded in this like immovable cosmic entity, we can have a conversation and my mind could be changed. Not them. It's grounded in this okay, God said so. I mean, who am I to question God? And if God's real, like, okay, I might not like it, but it is what it is. There's no good reason to think that he is real. So, that's what throws all of this
So let me
into
stop there.
question.
Let me stop you there. So when you say there's no good reason to believe that he's real,
Yeah.
what I think you mean to say is that the claims made by religious people thus far, that's what you're talking about. Is like the specific claims made by Christianity or Islam, Muhammad ascending on a winged horse, like all of these things that they've claimed so far. Like that is what you are talking about, correct? Or are you
Sure.
talking about a larger question about whether gods can exist, whether something besides what's been proposed so far might exist? Like where are you at there?
Well, I mean, I only know what I have personally encountered, which can be claims from other religious people or my own internal thoughts or introspections, which, ultimately influenced by other people. But yeah, I mean, there, like when I say no good reason, it's like, okay, there's no good reason to think there's a magical teapot in the middle of the solar system. I mean, maybe there's something out there at some point that would lead me to think that that's a good conclusion to come to, but there's just there's nothing there. I'm not saying that it's impossible for a god to exist. I think I I I I don't think it would be like I feel like this is unknowable information.
Which is
Um,
the core of agnosticism. Like
yeah, I
agnostics
mean
say,
that's
like this is an unknowable question.
that I mean that is ultimately my foundation is that I don't know one way or the other. Um, in fact, I don't think that that information is knowable. Therefore, I remain unconvinced of its truth. Therefore, I am the opposite of atheist, which would be an atheist. So
Which, by
technically,
the way, this is where I land too. So I'm an agnostic technically. Like I believe it's an unknowable question, but my belief, right? That's your 51-49. Which way do you lean? My belief is that I don't believe in the claims made about God so far. I will say I'm open, I'm searching, and I'm trying to figure it out. So, with that said, do you have any idea or any thoughts about what the hell actually is going on here? The nature of existence, nature of reality, consciousness, like all those deep questions. Do you have your own personal belief about that, or do you just kind of like I really don't know?
um, not really. I mean, it's like the hardest question ever, which makes me understand why. people come to the conclusions that they do. That's not an easy thing to sit with. It's like, okay, well, if you don't believe in God, then what do you believe in? It's like, I don't need to believe in anything. Like, I don't understand how ChatGPT is built on a technical level, and I'm okay with that. I don't need to know exactly how the universe was formed 11 billion years ago, if that's even how long ago it was formed. I don't know. I like I think it's okay to not know these things and for people to be like, "Oh, well, I might not know how ChatGPT is built on a technical level, but I do know for certain how our universe was created, and I will literally die for this belief." That just seems completely unreasonable to me. Um, I think dogma, no matter what it is like a huge fucking problem. You know, this is as it's dishonest, it's limiting, it's dangerous. Whether it's no matter the belief, it could be a a practically harmless belief that you hold dogmatically, but if you hold a belief dogmatically nonetheless, you're essentially harming yourself internally. You're closing yourself off from growth. You know, I say, um, I have a post that I made the other day, um, and I think it's relevant here. I said, "I don't know shit. I will never know shit, and I will never pretend that I do. I read, I think, I write, but at the end of the day, I'm just another ape trying to map the universe in front of me. Every post I make is a snapshot of where my head is today, built on a stack of guesses, arguments, and corrections that will keep changing as new information hits. That's all any of us are doing. The scale of what there is to know dwarfs anything a single mind can touch. My attention is finite, my time is finite, my vantage is narrow. I move through life on fragments and inferences, and so do you. Acting like that pile of fragments just happens to line up with absolute truth is delusion. People tell me I sound like I'm holier than thou, which I can understand. I mean, the way that I tweet can maybe come off that way sometimes. That they think that I feel like I'm smarter than everyone else. The truth is literally the opposite. When I post a long post, this isn't a sermon. They're me wrestling in public so I don't con myself in private. I write in detail because if I compress everything down to slogans, I start believing my own bullshit. Laying it out forces me to see where the logic bends or breaks. Humility is basic hygiene. The moment you decide you get it, curiosity dies and tribal reflex takes over. You stop learning and start defending. You trade I might be wrong for either I can't be wrong or that's just how I see the world. And from there, you slide into either fanaticism or a numb, lazy certainty that never has to lift a finger. I'll keep arguing hard because ideas matter, but I will never pretend to hold the final version of anything. Every claim is provisional, every stance is on review. If something I say helps you, good. If you tear it apart and improve it, that's even better. So like for someone to be like, I know this, really in any circumstance, if I think is ridiculous. I understand on a practical level, we need to like do things. And that requires you to believe that like when I pick up this cup, it's gonna follow my hand. Um, but ultimately, this form of radical humility is necessary to have an honest interaction with the world. And taking anything just on faith, I think is a fool's errand. And I don't see how that benefits anybody when faced with true alternatives because it's not either be religious, like be a Christian or be a uh, Stalinist that's gonna fucking kill everybody because you believe in the party. So like that's not the only two options here, and it's typically presented that way because a lot of people do that, but this is because they're taught that they need to have something. I mean, this is the consistent conditioning. It's like you have this religious hole in your heart. It has to be filled with something. Not really. It doesn't have to be filled with something dangerous like that. Fill it with like, man, I really like to play chess. There you go. You found your life meaning in being the best chess player in the world. And that doesn't require you to operate dogmatically regarding the most important question that there could possibly be. So I'm curious, because you said earlier that everyone has to be religious about something. What are some things that you are religious about?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say probably the question of ethics. Like that is really important to me, and I've built up, well, not built up. I've sort of accumulated arguments that arrive at objective ethics. Right. I'm very passionate about the non-aggression principle, almost to the point of being religious about it.
Mhm.
It's sort of like the high. And when I say religious, I mean it's kind of like the Jordan Peterson type thing. Whatever your highest value is, kind of becomes your god or substitutes for your god. And for me, non-aggression, free markets, all the things that are the center of the bullseye with respect to libertarianism, kind of have become that for me.
I think that's fair. Um, in a similar respect, I caution against such a thing. Um, that not necessarily where you're at is a bad thing, but what the foundation is built on may be. If it truly is this dogmatic belief that's unquestionable, you have the answer to the universe, uh, that could cause problems. The way
I
that
don't
I
think.
typically
Sorry to interrupt. But I don't think religiosity, the way I'm actually conceptualizing it, and what I'm trying to define my terms here. Being religious about something, it does not equate to being dogmatic. I
Mhm,
think those things are mutual, are not mutually exclusive, but they're separate questions.
gotcha.
So I don't believe I'm dogmatic about it. Like I still am. I question myself every day. I'm like you.
Yeah,
I'm one of these people that like. I'm like, where am I? I know I'm fucking up somewhere. Well, I'm getting something wrong, and so I always go back to the base and I'll like reevaluate more. How did I get here? Because you don't ever want to get in that situation where you're locked in the box. You just assumed everything. You believe you got everything right, and then you go forward just confidently, like going out in public looking like a dickhead because you got something wrong. And I think if you asked everybody, I think if you were like, okay, well, about this subject in general, do you think you've gotten anything wrong somewhere along the line? Everybody will say, sure, I'm pretty
mhm,
sure I've got something wrong. But if you ask them to recount their steps, it's like they'll agree, this is right, this is right, across the whole causal chain. And then they'll still get to the end and be like, I'm pretty sure I've got something wrong. And so I'm kind of in that mode right now, where it's like
yeah,
I'm pretty confident in the foundation of my beliefs, and I still move forward and advocate for peace and non-aggression and free markets and all the things that sort of derive from the non-aggression principle. But I'm still questioning it, and even to the point where I was like recently, I'm kind of like, well, you know what? And this is a good parallel with government and religion. It's like, well, these if I believe evolution is true, and I clearly do, there's infinite evidence for it, then these things evolved for a purpose, right? So governments evolved because they were better for causing reproduction and sort of expanding the numbers of human beings, right? Making sure we don't die out. So it has some utility, or at least it did in the past. So am I being too I don't know, arrogant in trying to dispense with it? Like, am I knocking over a tower where I don't know what the consequences of that are going to be? Like, I think about that a lot with both religion and with government.
mhm. Yeah, well, I first of all, I think this is a good thing that you wrestle with that. I think, the biggest problem is that a lot of religious people don't do that. They lack such a thing, which is what I think the issue is,
Well, hold
not
on,
necessarily.
publicly or privately? Because I think there's a huge difference between, it's particularly with people who are religious, the things they say publicly versus
Mhm.
their internal state. Like, I think we've all known people who profess one thing, but number one,
Yeah.
act in a different way. Or if you get them in private, they'll actually admit to you that they've got doubts or they're wrestling with stuff. And like even my buddy Tyler Toad, like he's like 100 and some thousand followers on Twitter. Uh, his brand is Christianity, and he told me like he went through a crisis of faith like a year ago or 2 years ago. So it's like, I mean, he's one of the honest ones, but there's a lot of people that are dishonest that will keep professing, I know everything, I'm not questioning anything, but in their heart, they're wrestling with these things. So I wonder how much of that is actually, a bullshit facade versus what's actually going on inside.
Yeah, I mean, technically we can't really know that, but I would I would press and say my experience is that it's people the doubts that they have are potentially with the particulars, in what you said, where it's like, "Okay, well, did you get something wrong along the way?" It's like, "Oh, most certainly I did, but I'm not gonna be able to pinpoint it because, of course, I think everything is right." Um, I have had a lot of conversations with my father, who is very religious, and we were having a conversation, not too long ago about the validity or trustworthiness of the Bible, and he was really trying to argue with these points, and at some point I stopped and said, "Hypothetically, if there was just irrefutable evidence that you were convinced of that came out tomorrow that said just the Bible's just bullshit. It's made up. That's it. Like I know that's not gonna happen, but hypothetically, this proves it wrong 100%. None of it is true. Would this affect your belief in God?" And he was like, well, no. And it's like, okay, then that's not a worthwhile conversation because your belief is not contingent on this. And I suspect that a lot of people that do wrestle with doubt still operate on this foundational assumption of like, okay, well, yeah, there is something out there and it's probably God and it's probably the Christian God, but like, why did my daughter die? Why would God allow this to happen? And it's like you're already begging the question by framing it as why would God allow this to happen? Even if
Real,
there's
real,
moments of, okay, well, is there even a God?
Real quick, before
Okay,
you
well,
go
of
past
course
this,
there is.
I think this is so important what you just raised. I don't want to forget this. And this is like advice for anybody who's talking to anyone else about a controversial issue. If you can start early in the conversation with asking them to define the criteria by which they might change their mind. Like is there anything like let's talk about this. Like, is there anything like the Bible being false or whatever it is, right? Like that would cause you to arrive at a different conclusion, a different belief. And if they say no, just exit the conversation. Like
Yeah.
there's no point even having it. I think that a lot of people get sucked into these things where somebody is just dogmatically believing, regardless, just avoiding all the evidence and all the reason, and it's not going to be productive.
I totally agree. I think there's a lot of things that go into encouraging these beliefs to be immovable in the way that they are sometimes. And it could very well be. I mean, there's a lot of people that have this sunk cost feeling of like I've lived my entire life for this thing. If I'm wrong about this, I've literally wasted my life and made these very significant decisions about the trajectory of my life, and I would not be in this place unless I did those things. And if I was wrong, like shit, you know? This is something that I personally wrestle with because I got a bunch of tattoos. It's like, okay, well, at some point in my life, I might be like, this symbol that I have, I don't believe that anymore. And I've had to come to terms with that being a very real possibility because I'm have that pressure of like, there's this thing that's very difficult to get off of my body that's going to incentivize me to just like not change my mind about whatever it is. And I don't want that, of course.
Well, to be
So
fair, just to make you feel better, so I know what you're talking about, and the the tattoo that you have of Bernie Sanders and the mittens, that was iconic. So even though you're not a Bernie bro anymore, just be aware that like you can just play that off as like that was just a cultural tattoo. So
well, you know, it's funny, but it's very much a true thing. It's like, okay, I it's like a scrapbook, you know? This is a time in my life where I liked this thing and I got this on my body. If I don't believe it anymore, it's like, "Okay, well, I did then." You know,
yep.
this is a part of me, it's a part of my life, it was where I was at, and that's kind of what how you have to if you have like charged belief style tattoos, that's kind of how you have to change your mindset to, and that's something I had to grapple with. But for religious people, like it's very they've spent their whole life doing this, and this is why it's such an important question. Because like I said, if I'm living my life as if it isn't true, I'm doing the wrong thing. And I don't want to do like I don't want to do the wrong thing. You know, I might not like the conclusion of or the implications of there being a Christian God. But if there is, there is. You know, like maybe I'll just be unhappy about it, but like I'm not gonna like go to hell out of principle. I'm not a fucking idiot, you know, but I mean it's like I don't know. In these accounts that just shit on atheism all the time, they don't seem to understand this, or at least they pretend like they don't. It's like, dude, it's not my fault that I don't believe this thing that you do. Like, even if I had what I believe to be an objective set of uh moral views that they think is unjustified because it's not grounded in a divine command, so what? People live in contradictions all the time. Like this is life. Like you certainly believe contradictory things. I don't think that's avoidable. You may not realize that you are. So this like, oh, you're living a fucking lie because you don't go around raping people, but you have no God that's telling you not to rape people. I don't think that's a particularly good argument.
It's kind of insulting from our side, particularly because, for the most part, I know there's differences, but for the most part, we arrive at the same place to the point where the religious people will accuse atheists of stealing their ethics, right? It's like, well, let's not kill, let's not rape, let's not steal, let's not. There's all these things, the thou shalt nots that we pretty much agree on. You can either reason it from, first principles, objectively, or you can, if you believe it just fell from the sky in some tablets, cool. We both essentially have the same ethics. So I don't understand why we're having this major argument. Like, if we're just all cool to each other, can we just be cool to each other? I don't understand the fight, the need to fight about it.
Because it's a gotcha. It's a way to just dismiss whatever the person is saying, and I get it. There's a lot of, Reddit atheists that can be
Uh,
really annoying,
the
and,
worst.
I was such a person once upon a time, so
Me too. I
I
will
under
raise my hand. I say this all the time. I went through my Reddit atheist phase, and it's I think it's just part of the journey, man. It's like the tattoos. I got the tattoo, and it's in my past.
yeah, and I the answer to the Reddit atheist isn't the Reddit Christian. It's don't fucking do that, like, it's not and so a lot of these they become this sort of simple-minded Christian counterparts to the Reddit atheist, and I don't think that's useful. It's infuriating. It can be as infuriating as the 17-year-old that got upset and stopped going to church and, whatever. Like, there's no substance there, and that's what causes the problem. So, like, doing the same thing in reverse, maybe it feels good or something, but it's not it's not gonna accomplish anything. It just
It reminds me of politics. It's like escalations. You know, I think that the Reddit atheists, I think, emerge from a fact that they had religious injury. They grew up like I did, and you were hurt by your faith, and you realize you were lied to, and you get bitter about it, and you start attacking religious people. And then you have this group of thought leaders, of four horsemen. We've got Hitchens, and we've got like, and they're tearing Christians to pieces, and then they got to bring the William Lane Craigs and these other people, the apologists, to come fight them, and there's this like battle, right? As opposed to having just rational, reasoned, low, not inflammatory conversations and trying to actually discuss things. You see just fighting. It's so much like politics. It's shocking to me. It's just you're on a team. You got to shoot down the other team, and you're not even worried about getting to the truth. We should be looking at this, in my view, as a problem we're all trying to tackle together, and we can have different views on it, and we can be respectful of each other. And but maybe I'm just naive. Like that seems to me like almost too much for this group.
maybe, but I don't think I think it's not exactly deniable that it is incredibly harmful because
Sure.
you you're just getting people to dig their heels in more. You're getting them to be more dogmatic about this thing, and this dogma is obviously not a reliable pathway to truth. I mean, if we care about truth and doing the right things or having an accurate understanding of reality, this is doing actually the opposite. Even from the Christian perspective, a lot of these anti-atheist accounts, they are building an audience of people and providing them with the weakest possible ammunition and building them a foundation that is incredibly fragile because the best way to get to a religious perspective, I would argue, is a slow burn of genuine inquiry, conversation, education. And if you're just like,
Hold on, I'm
look
gonna
at
add
these
one I'm gonna add one to that, which I think is super important, is experience. Having experiential, like some sort of spiritual experience, either mediated by psychedelics or breath work or meditation or whatever. Like, I think that is a huge component that often gets overlooked. It's not all arguments.
Mhm. And it's yeah, a lot of times it's not arguments at all. You just have this experience. But what I would say is that when you present it as look at these fucking idiot atheists that are
Yeah.
obviously wrong,
Yep.
no need to, they can just be dismissed. You're that means that that belief system that they just built is equally as fragile as that. All they need to go is like, oh, the so my shit can also just be bullshit. I mean, a weak foundation could just be destroyed at any moment, and like I just think that they're do because they make the Christian thing. Okay, well, I got it figured out. This is all obviously wrong and whatever, and it's not built on anything. There's no foundation there. So at any moment the rug can just be pulled and it's a huge problem. And so if you're genuinely trying to help religious people understand their faith and become stronger in their faith, you're accomplishing the opposite. It's like you're not even achieving your own goals. Like, what are you doing here? Like, you really just you're not even just like a sellout to just shit on atheists because whatever, they're not your people, but like you're selling out the Christian people too. Because if you're going to be a sort of thought leader in this space with a large audience that you're influencing and you're creating Christians that have no foundation at all, you're essentially creating people that will become atheists. Because a lot of atheists have experienced this. If you don't have a proper religious foundation, once you become old enough, you go, oh, there's like other options. It's so easy to just have that rug pulled. I can't imagine that religious people, especially religious thought leaders that are trying to spread the message, want that. I mean, come on.
Yeah, it's not a very effective tactic. If you're just going from a pure, like a strategic standpoint, like, and also it's anti-Christian, honestly. Like if you're sitting there and your job is to just be inflammatory and attack atheists all day, do you really think you're reaching them? I mean, you're supposed to be proselytizing, right? You're supposed to be a light unto the world. You're supposed to be the shining example of what Christianity is and sort of convince people. It's kind of that Ron Paul thing. The best way to bring people in is by setting a great example. And it's like, that's a shit example, man.
Yeah,
Like
you're
it's a,
doing a disservice to the Christians that you're leading, you're doing a disservice to the atheists that you're leading, and it's all in what? It's the service of
ego, it
cl
feels like.
clicks? Like, y this is a huge problem. Like, it doesn't do anything for anybody. Everyone's just gonna dig their heels in at the end of the day. No one's gonna be better for it except maybe the guy that made the post because he got a little bit of money or something. That sounds really I mean, does not sound very Christian to me.
It does
You're
not.
gonna sell out your fellow man, sell out your fellow Christian for some coin?
Well, also push
Come
if
on,
you actually
man.
believe your ontology, like you're pushing somebody who's not a believer instead of bringing them in to potentially be saved, you're pushing them further into, eternal punishment and damnation, which like that seems like a really shitty thing to do if that's what you
Yeah,
actually
and well,
believe.
that's the thing, you're attacking something that they don't even believe themselves. They feel personally attacked because 'cause you're using the label of their group, and they feel personally, inclined to correct you, and then you just immediately dismiss them in a sort of holier than thou tone that's just gonna piss them off. Be like, "Fuck this guy, and fuck all the people like him."
Yep.
So now you're just come on, and then the Christians on their side see the atheists get pissed off and go, look at these fucking pissed off idiots. Not only are they obviously wrong, but they're mad, and now they're saying all these slurs and whatever, and it's like, you're just igniting hatred, which is like, I'm not a Christian, but that is pretty much the antithesis of the message of Jesus. Like, come on, I understand it doesn't get clicks to try to have a genuine conversation, but dude, so that's what makes me mad is it's like it's the hypocrisy and then it's the lying too. Like I'm sure like I don't know most of these people, but like, oh, I used to be an atheist and here are all the things that atheists don't even believe. It's like I don't believe that you used to even be an atheist. Like this stuff that
Yeah.
you're saying makes it clear that like you don't know what any of this even means at all, and you're just saying it. I just I don't see any value in such a thing at all. It
Well,
just seems harmful.
here's a question then. Who in the space, meaning like discussions about supreme questions of the universe, gods, and philosophy and whatever, who do you think is doing it right? Who does it well?
I think I think there's 2 separate things. There's the more, like, there's a Bible scholar that I really enjoy watching. His name is Dan McClellan, and he himself is a member of the Mormon Church,
Hmm.
but he is really good at, Bible scholarship, and he's, like, so well read and understands all of this. I like him a lot. Um, I forget exactly the other guy's name. It's Cliff something. You know him?
Cliff, and he's a Christian.
Yeah, yeah, Cliff yeah, see, I don't even know how to say his last name, so I don't remember it. Knechle.
Never heard of him. Glad I
He
asked
was
though. These are two people that I've never even. They're not on my radar yet.
he's a really good Christian communicator. Um,
And, what
he
the question, by the way,
absolutely
wasn't
is doing it
limited
right.
strictly to Christian communicators. I just mean anybody who's in these spaces, whether they're atheist or religious or whatever. Like, I want to sort of highlight people who you think are doing a good job of having these type of conversations and direct people
Well, okay,
towards
so
them.
I think that guy Cliff he is a, like, street preacher type. He'll go to college campuses and just have people ask him questions.
He's the Charlie
Um,
Kirk of street preaching, huh?
yeah, so a bit, but he's very honest. He's very forthcoming with, if someone brings up, like, a bad Bible verse or a contradiction or something, he's very forthcoming about, like, acknowledging that, acknowledging the difficulty of reconciling such a thing, um, and won't get super heated in a conversation, is, like, genuinely trying to understand where this other person is coming from. I think he tends to do it right. I think, yeah, Dan McClellan's really good with the Bible scholarship. Um, one of my favorite YouTubers is, Alex O'Connor.
That's who I
Um,
was gonna bring up. I think he's amazing.
yeah, he's great from the atheist perspective. Um, I still really like Sam Harris a lot. Um, although he doesn't tend to focus too much on religion much nowadays.
Yeah, boy, he sure had a a pretty nasty Trump crash out, didn't he?
Um, I the thing about Sam Harris is that a lot of the clips that go around that look really bad are typically pulled out of a context in which it isn't really as bad. Not to just defend him outright because I think he obviously has takes that I disagree with. But as for someone that is like just honest and straightforward and level-headed, I think he's one of the best.
I will
Um,
agree with you there. Definitely a lot of clickbait stuff pulled out of context, but he definitely has a lot of substance that's really, really wrong, particularly since he's a science guy and should know better. And he went so crazy on the COVID stuff. Like
mm,
he completely went off the reservation. He severed friendships with people like Brett Weinstein and all these people. And he completely was a terrible example through that. But I will say you're right. Like he does get a bunch of shit for stuff that is blown out of proportion, taken out of context, and that's a shame because Sam is a good, deep thinker. He has the capability to really think and communicate clearly. His verbal IQ is off the charts. I really enjoy Sam in a lot of ways, and it's made me sad to watch that sort of crash out because I think he was an important voice, and now he's not even engaging with anybody who might have a counter view because he's kind of siloed himself up in more of like a leftist corner, which upsets me a little bit because he was having more of these conversations with more right leaning people, and that was a cool thing to see. I really enjoyed that.
yeah, so there's um, that tends to be my extent with engaging with religious stuff. I used to watch some of like the atheist experience, but that's a very similar situation where it's not particularly productive because most of the people that would call in would just be unmatched intellectually, and that doesn't make for very good conversations when it's like, this unmatched intellectual person is going into something that's a debate forum that these people do for a living.
Right, right.
They're gonna look stupid, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're wrong. They're just not gonna be prepared for this, and that's like the target, contestant for that show. So I don't really engage with that anymore.
What about like Matt Dillahunty?
I mean, he is the atheist experience guy.
Oh, is that the guy? Okay, I wasn't sure what his show was. Okay,
Yeah, I
yeah.
just I don't watch him, but
I've
I
never
don't
watched
have
his
I don't have
show. I've
any
always
issue with
seen him
him.
like in a debate setting or something like that. So I've never
Not
seen
really.
him.
I haven't engaged with him for a while, not for any particular reason, I just haven't
What about that
looked it out.
Rationality Rules guy? I forgot that guy's name. The guy with the beard.
I used to watch some of his stuff. Um, this could be completely wrong, but the vibe that I get from him and when I watch his videos, it's very like it's way too cookie cutter for me. It's like, okay, this thing this person said violates these particular three fallacies for these reasons. Um,
He's a
and it's just
syllogism
like this
bro for
isn't how
sure.
people think, right? Like to some extent, I might find it interesting. Like they did these three fallacies. Okay, that person doesn't give a shit. Whatever. I so I that's just content that isn't really for me. Um, I definitely gravitate more towards the Alex O'Connor side of things, which is great. I mean, I've literally been watching him since he started on YouTube like 10 years ago, and we're um pretty much the same age, and our religious trajectory has been pretty much exactly the same. So it's really cool because if he has a conversation with somebody, I can almost live vicariously through him as if I'm having that conversation with them, which is really cool because we're very much on the same wavelength with pretty much everything regarding worldview, which makes him basically my favorite YouTuber in that like I just feel like that's me, you know?
Yeah, and I like Alex a lot too, except for I'm not a ethical emotivist. Like I don't know where he's at with that. I think he's completely off the reservation on ethics. But other than that, like I'm completely vibing with him. And it's just fun fact. I know the guy who produces his show,
Oh, cool.
or actually, sorry, films his show. I don't know if you've seen George from the Tin Men. That guy
Mm.
is awesome. I actually interviewed him in London like 2 years ago with Helen Pluckrose. That was a fun time. But I'm like one person removed from Alex O'Connor. I would love to have him on. He'd be like a dream guest, but we gotta grow the channel a bit, I think, before he it would be worth his time.
Yeah, he'd be great. And like what I was saying is that alignment with worldview is the ethics is certainly included in that. So I think that's one thing that me and you probably deviate on pretty significantly.
Really? So you're an ethical emotivist, huh?
Yeah, I would describe myself as such. Although I try to steer clear of these like labels, but that seems like a good enough label to describe how I engage with ethical questions.
Interesting, interesting. So how does that jive with libertarianism? Because like that seems to me to be a very objective, sorry, subjective standard. Just boo activity. I don't like that.
Well, it's not a standard at all, actually. Um, so, I mean, one could argue that maybe I have less theoretical, like grounding as an objectivist might. Um, and this is what I don't know if you saw it. Very little people did because much too academic for most people to spend their time. But I wrote out essentially my political philosophy, which I called authorial jurisdiction, which is coming to the conclusion of libertarianism without any sort of thick moral commitments. It's very similar to Hans Hoppe's argumentation ethics, but it doesn't require the reader to make these sort of objective moral truth claims that comes along with it. Because that's something that I personally struggled with. Is like, okay, well, I agree with a lot of these conclusions, um, but these objective moral truth commitments I'm uncomfortable with. So what am I supposed to do here? Am I not supposed to be at this conclusion? And so
Well, what do you object to, first of all? Because, I mean, typically, if you distill it down, libertarians who come from an objective standpoint, typically through the religious channel or through reasoning from first principles, are like, okay, well, we're rooted in self ownership. Like
Mhm.
we run this meat machine. This is ours. This is our boundary of our body, and it can't be transgressed. With that foundation, like, maybe talk me through how you view it in that light, or do you reject that, or do you accept it? Like, how does it work?
Sure. So I think what we can do actually is we can just kind of like pick apart what the core argument for my philosophy is, starting from the very beginning. So the first line in this is here, and I'll actually send this to you.
Yeah, please do, because I don't think I've read that.
I'll send it on Twitter. So this is within this document. Actually, I have the core argument, which is very short, and then I have this project scope, which is just one page about why I did what I did here. And then I have a glossary of words that I think are worth defining to understand this properly. And then I have 11 pages of common objections to this, um, which I kind of just came up with myself because most people don't care enough to read this and actually object in any way. So if you do at some point read this and want to write out an objection, I
Yeah,
would really
I
appreciate
love
that.
this. This is so you. Like, this is exactly the way you
Appreciate
write everything. I love it, and it's so
So
opposite of the way I operate.
so I so first line is I begin with the only entry point that does not beg questions, acting. And what I mean by this is there's there's no presuppositions baked into this. This doesn't beg any questions. We are doing this. You know, it doesn't matter why. It doesn't matter how. Um, we just are doing this. We are acting. And I say here, you're reading, I'm writing, both of us are selecting means to ends. Again, it doesn't matter why or how. This is just what is happening. This is observable reality. Denial fails by first use, since the denial would be an act that presupposes what it tries to erase. From this, I keep one primitive, first person authorship. I speak from a center, you do the same. So, denial is in I deny that you are acting. Not only is this just like unintelligible, but it's denying by first use.
It's self defeating,
It's
is what it is.
self-defeating. It's I'm denying that you are doing this, but I'm denying that I'm acting. It's like that doesn't make sense because I'm acting by denying this fails on arrival.
It's so funny because this is exactly the way I conceptualize self ownership. Because if you're going to argue against self ownership, you're using your self ownership to argue against it, which is a self defeater. And so this
Mhm.
is very, very much aligned. It almost seems like a restating to me. I'm not sure what the differences actually are. I'll have to think about it more.
So there's the difference becomes a bit more clear as I go through this. Do I have an additional step which I call jurisdiction, which is what I think you would call self-ownership. Um, and then I also have what I call to be self-ownership, which is one step above. But I'll explain what this means here. So I say I use this primitive, which is the acting, the self first person authorship, to set the ground rule for any discussion that hopes to justify anything. So in any sort of interaction that I have with anybody for any reason, this is the ground rule for anything, and that includes trying to justify something. If you try to move me by reasons, you already treat me as a source of commitment. It's like, hey, I think you should be my slave. Great. I've tried to move you by reasons. This is treating you as a source of commitment. You control your body while you speak. You expect me to accept or refuse without external compulsion. This is what having a discussion to try to justify something is. Um, I could try with external compulsion to make you do something, but this isn't me trying to justify something to you. And this also isn't me saying that you're wrong for trying to use external compulsion. This is just me saying, in this particular instance, this is very specified. In the moment where I'm trying to justify something to you, I'm using that first person authorship that is assuming your first person authorship, which is a source of commitment. Justification uses the grammar of self direction on both sides. Now, I say define a person as an agent capable of forming ends in selecting means with some continuity over time. This is how I'm defining person. Other people might use a different definition here, but for this sake, this is the definition that I'm using. An agent capable of forming ends and selecting means with some continuity over time. It's just a human with memory, not even necessarily human. This is a being with memory. They are selecting means, forming ends, whatever. Define a body as the scarce physical system through which that agent initiates and halts movements. We, for better or worse, we find ourselves in these flesh vessels that we can't exactly remove ourselves from. Two
You
agents,
could. I just wouldn't recommend it to anybody. Don't unalive yourself, people.
but even then, you would just be, you wouldn't be removing yourself from it. You would be dead. But
Fair. Good
nonetheless,
point.
two agents cannot exercise full control over one body at the same time without collision. So this is not, this is, I'm animating this body, you're animating that body. If both of us want to animate my body, that's not possible without collision. Even in this science fiction hypothetical, we can't both inhabit the same body. We will be literally colliding with each other. You could use conflict here as well. And so these are this is the definitions here. So control is brute ability. This is what I mean by control is just brute ability. So I could control your body. I'm literally grabbing your arms and moving it. That's different from animating your body, but control is brute ability. Personal
Neuralink
juris
implant.
Sure, or implants. Personal jurisdiction is the standing authority to consent, refuse, and exclude regarding one's body that others have reasoned to respect for coordination. So this is the differentiation I make between jurisdiction and ownership. Jurisdiction is the standing authority to consent, refuse, and exclude regarding one's own body that I'm animating, that others have reason to respect for coordination. That's self-explanatory. Ownership is the standing, publicly intelligible claim to exclude, authorize, and transfer use. So I make the point to separate jurisdiction from ownership because when you talk about self-ownership in the same way that you talk about ownership over a car, um, you run into some issues. You run into necessary explanations that you have to make that differentiate self-ownership from other types of ownership, because the animation of my body is inalienable. I can't remove myself from that. My car is alienable from me.
For sure.
And this causes problems because it's like, okay, well, I could sell my car. I can't sell myself into slavery. That doesn't make sense. There's a way to explain this in a reasonable way, but this is just to avoid such a conversation, because that's a big academic topic of conversation with uh, Rothbard's natural rights and stuff. It's like, okay, self-ownership. Why can't I sell myself into slavery? It's ownership nonetheless. And it's like, okay, well, this is a whole other conversation that I don't think is necessary. So I separate the two there. I have Four options here. I say either A, each person holds jurisdiction over the body they animate, or B, some persons hold jurisdiction over others, or C, a committee holds jurisdiction over everyone's bodies, or D, no one holds jurisdiction at all. And what I do is I test these against two different filters. The first I call the discourse filter. This follows from authorship. You cannot justify to someone a rule that denies the minimal status you presuppose when offering justification to them. This isn't to say that you literally cannot do this. Of course, you can try to do this. And I'm not saying you're wrong to try and do this at all. I'm saying if you try to do this, you cannot justify this to someone, a rule that denies the minimal status you presuppose when offering that justification to them. What I'm saying is this is unintelligible. It fails this arbitrary filter that I've created. The second is the coordination filter that follows from scarcity. This is the rule must minimize avoidable conflict and make resolution tractable under repeated interaction. And this is literally just for the ease of coordinating with other people that are necessarily going to interact with each other.
Why is this necessary? I don't understand why you inserted this here.
Um, because it's also a filter that I'm using when when judging each one of these potential options. It's two different filters that I'm using here. These are two things that I care about. Um, for it to be able to be justified and for it to actually minimize conflict. To me, these are two separate things that I think are necessary for my political philosophy and my worldview.
Okay, cool.
So I say B fails the discourse filter. This is some persons hold just jurisdiction over others. Because if you argue that you may rule me, you've already appealed to my capacity to accept or reject by reasons. You ask me to do what only a holder of personal jurisdiction can do, and then announce that I am not that holder. This is simply unintelligible here because you're just contradicting yourself. B also fails the coordination filter. Permanent mastery invites permanent resistance and entrenches conflict. You're constantly going to try and justify that you're ruling over me. You're going to fail in that justification. Also, I don't want people ruling over me. I'm going to continuously fight back on this because we are on equal footing when it comes to jurisdiction, and you're trying to just overstep that into my boundary.
Yeah, and this is basically a reinforcement of Aristotle's law of identity, right? A equals A. A human is a human, so one cannot control another human without their consent, right? Like you have the exact same rights, you have the exact same responsibilities, and just because an individual makes a claim that they can control you, or a quorum of individuals, n number of people when they get together somehow magically confer an ability to sort of control you. That's completely illogical when it comes to just basic logic.
Right. C, which is a committee holds jurisdiction over everyone's bodies. This fails the coordination filter. If each movement requires prior collective say, contention and oversight escalate without limit. So this committee, whether it's 10 people or everyone, everyone owning each other is a problem because every movement that I make, which again, jurisdiction is the standing authority to consent to these actions. It's going to require me to consent to these things. So if a bunch of people hold jurisdiction over a bunch of other people's bodies, you just can't move anymore. Like that's not you're going to fall into this contradiction immediately on arrival. And so this obviously fails the coordination filter because this is impossible to coordinate. And then C also fails the discourse filter in practice since a committee cannot simultaneously hold personal jurisdiction over each member's body while those members claim jurisdiction over their own voices. Because again, two people can't hold jurisdiction over the same thing because you can't both have full reign over the consent and authority of one's body. And then D, where nobody holds jurisdiction over anyone, looks neutral in language, but it collapses in practice. If no one holds jurisdiction, then refusal holds no standing and consent has no authority. So use falls under seizure and defense. Um, okay, you don't have jurisdiction over your body, so I'm just going to take over your body, and your refusal means nothing. So it just doesn't. It fails immediately because there's no standing authority to consent or not consent to anything. This fails the coordination filter as conflict becomes continuous. It also fails the discourse filter since without standing agents, jurisdiction has no audience. Whoever acts first commands until displaced, and then the system just slides into B, which is that constant mastery that invites conflict. So A survives both filters, which is each person holds jurisdiction over the body they animate. When I justify a claim to you, I respect your capacity to commit or refuse. That's A in discourse form. In practice, A aligns jurisdiction with the physical locus of control, which minimizes conflict. Each person sets ends for the only body they can move without mediation. So, with all that being established, enduring coordination among strangers requires more than just personal jurisdiction because, I just say it here, when claims must persist beyond the moment and be legible to third parties, we move from bare jurisdiction to ownership. The same authority given public standing so others can rely on it across time, recognize who may say yes or no, and verify delegation or transfer. So, okay, great. Everyone has jurisdiction over their own bodies. Now we got to figure out how to actually interact with each other. There are scarce resources that we need to use to survive. So, how are we going to deal with that? Having given first person authority, public standing as ownership, apply it to external means. These too are scarce and rivalrous. The same two filters apply. I require an initial rule that does not contradict the discourse setting and that minimizes conflict. First use does that by tying title to observable initiation. If a resource is unclaimed by any present steward and by any traceable prior claim, a person begins a publicly intelligible use. A claim of ownership forms that others can recognize. This is essentially homesteading.
Yeah, this is basically Lockean in nature.
Yep. Once such a claim exists, it's alienable by consent on the party's terms. The hinge remains assent. So any norm N offered to person P as a reason for compliance presupposes that P can accept or reject by reasons rather than brute compulsion. If N denies that P holds jurisdiction over the acts that assent or refuse, then N cannot be justified to P through argument without conflict between content and use. This shows that N lacks the kind of warrant argument can supply. If someone abandons the fields of reasons and reaches for force, they have stepped outside of jurisdiction. They're just outside of this entirely. Because to be clear, this isn't like I had this is the truth of the universe. This is a standard that people can use to judge actions of whether or not they are justifiable or not. Um, Agents interact under certainty. Each round presents a choice to respect the baseline or attack it. Where violations are priced by defense, loss of reputation, and foregone cooperation, the expected value of predation falls below the expected value of compliance. So, you should probably follow this, or you're going to get into conflict with people. The price of such conflict via defense, loss of reputation, foregone cooperation, this will likely this value of predation will fall below the expected value of actually cooperating with people, complying with this standard, and being able to have a functioning, fruitful society. And so I condense this into a sequence that's easier to understand. Premise one, any attempt at justification presupposes first person authorship on both sides. Premise two, in a world of scarce rival bodies, A stable baseline allocation is required to avoid persistent collision. Premise three, of the available baselines, only personal jurisdiction over one's own body satisfies both the discourse and coordination filters. Premise four, where claims must persist beyond immediate control and be legible to third parties, external means take on ownership by publicly intelligible first use and update by transfer through consent. Premise five, a default rule against initiatory force prevents chains of intrusion in reprisal and preserves the conditions for lasting cooperation among agents. Conclusion, inalienable personal jurisdiction and a property order form a stable package for agents who seek the greatest possible conflict avoidance and cooperation among equals. Everything in that package rests on the same primitive. When the standing of authorship is pressured or obscured, jurisdiction, ownership, and the norms that guard them inherit that distortion. So that means at any point, if you try and pressure or push back against anything that built up to that property order, everything else that is going to inherit that distortion. So you're going to basically make the bricks fall. So that is means to respect each step of this process. That's basically what that means.
Cool. Is it weird that I followed all that? I think we probably lost most of the audience, but I tracked all of that, and I got a lot of influence that was pulled in there. How much John Stuart Mill have you read?
A bit.
Seems like
I've
there's a
read.
lot of utilitarianism that's baked into this syllogism.
Well, it needs to be. I mean, we need to be able to have a standard that can be utilized to properly coordinate with people around us without entrenching in conflict. Of course, we don't have to have that, but if we don't, we're going to have just constant mastery and fighting, and I don't think anybody wants that. So the goal for this was to essentially create something as thin as possible, um, because the biggest issue with some forms of libertarianism is okay, this, and this. Therefore, this is the correct ethical truth objectively.
Which
Which you
is
may
where I'm
be,
at, by the way.
yeah,
So
which you may
just
be convinced of, but that's a heavy thing for people to swallow. And so this is partly for me since I don't swallow that, but also for people that may eventually swallow that, but may feel like they can't get to that conclusion without swallowing it and reject it outright. And neither one of us want that because we come to the same conclusions really when it comes to coordination. We don't want people to reject that coordination conclusion because they don't swallow that ethical objectivity, if that makes sense.
it does, but I see the danger on the other side. Like because I look at this utilitarianism in general, not necessarily a knock on your work here. This is very well thought out, but you could make the claim that we need government, right? Because government is the conflict and minimizing mechanism, and having this strong deterrent, right? That if you act in a certain way, that they're going to lock you in a cage. That prevents conflict, and so you can make the argument. I'm not saying that's the correct argument, but I think
You
you
could make
open
the
your
argument, but I think that would very clearly uh, violate the discourse filter, and also the coordination filter. You can make the argument, but I think that this standard creates a a good enough foundation to be able to fight back against that. Now, granted, it does have a thin foundation, so you can't claim, okay, well, the government is like objectively wrong in its existence, um, which you may be able to do this with an objective standard of ethics, um, but I don't have that, and also as someone who is an ethical emotivist anyways, I think that ultimately you're just doing the same thing as me anyways. So even if objectivists feel like, oh well, I have better footing here because I can make this objective claim, I would say I mean, you're making that objective claim, but that doesn't make it any more grounded than mine. They're both just not really grounded at all. Um, and that's essentially where I come from.
Yeah, and I'm actually cool that both of them are out there. Like I'm kind of in this that same boat with respect to ethics generally. Like if you come at let's say you come at the position of liberty from a religious perspective, because you just believe that humans have a soul, they're created in the image of God, and there's a something that can't be transgressed without committing like this huge moral sin. I don't care necessarily how you get there as long as you get there. So me, like, first of all, I'm not saying I'm right. Like I'm coming at it like I think I can reason out objective ethics. Could be completely wrong, and maybe you're right, right? Maybe it's all just subjective, and we're deploying utilitarianism. Like as long as we get to that end, to where I'm not being transgressed against, and you aren't, and we're respecting each other's property rights, and we're not raping each other. Like I really don't care. And so there might be a type of person that will resonate with the emotional, sorry, the emotivists, and will resonate with the people that are focused on utilitarian outcomes, right? Whereas, like I'm saying, like, look, this is a line you absolutely shall not cross, and there's an objective basis for it. That might resonate with a different group of people. Everyone's different, and I'm okay with multiple arguments as long as we arrive at that same conclusion, which leads to peace and free trade and capitalism and increasing standards of living, which I think we all agree are noble aims, right? These are these are utilitarian outcomes that we all believe will be manifest if we respect each other.
Yeah, I understand the argument of like, okay, since this is as thin as it is, it can easily be rejected, right? Oh, I'm just gonna okay, fuck this. I'm just gonna use force anyways. I would argue that this is the case all the time. You know, if just because you may think or may even be accurate in that this is grounded uh, in objectivity, it still only takes someone to be like, okay, I don't really care. I'm gonna take your stuff anyways.
And
You
they
know,
do it
so it's
every day right now anyway, right?
right. So it's like I I understand this to an extent, but ultimately it doesn't matter. Either someone's gonna choose to follow this or not. This is my attempt to go, this can make sense without the objective moral truth claims. Like that's really it. Um, and that was something that I wanted because it's like, okay, like I was saying, I'm at this, and I talk about this sort of in the project scope here. I say this project exists to carve out a disciplined foundation for how I think political life works. Once you treat authorship as primary and coordination as the central engineering problem, I wanted a piece that turns a diffuse bundle of intuitions into a legible object tight enough to be tested, revised, and extended without collapsing. It's written as a tool for clarity, a scaffold that keeps me honest about what I assume, what follows, and where the real stress points live. The aim is to describe a minimal grammar of social order for beings who act, communicate, and collide. Human beings pursue ends through means, share space with other pursuing beings, and generate boundary conflicts over bodies, time, attention, and scarce external means. Any workable political philosophy has to handle that friction with rules that survive contact with strangers. I'm trying to model the conditions under which interaction stays intelligible, disputes stay resolvable, and cooperation stays possible without dissolving authors into inputs for a higher control loop. A central decision in the writing is to keep the framework thin. Thin here means the foundation carries as few heavy commitments as possible while still doing real work. The deepest reason is metaethical. I wanted a coordination framework that stands on authorship scarcity in the structure of jurisdiction without relying on the reader to swallow claims without objective about objective moral properties. Many systems reach coordination conclusions I respect, then demand a metaphysical buy-in about moral facts that I simply do not experience as compulsory. This project routes around that dependency. It builds the load bearing structure from what acting and reason giving already presuppose, plus the practical constraints of rivalrous existence. So somebody like Hans Hoppe, who has his argumentation ethics, someone might look over this and be like, okay, that sounds good, sounds good, sounds good. Now, this foundation that it's built on, I don't buy it. Now, this invalidates everything that follows to that person in particular. That's what I'm trying to avoid because they might look at the conclusion and be like, that's a cool conclusion, but like, dude, fuck this foundation. Or it gives the critic ammunition to just dismiss it outright. And this is a problem because everyone's going to try and find a justification to rule over you.
Always.
So I say I'm interested in a framework that can be evaluated by anyone willing to reason about agency and coordination, including people whose meta ethics differ wildly from me, like me and you. Here, normativity shows up as warrant inside practice. If you address another as an author, you invoke assent, refusal, commitment, illegible standing. That is a functional grammar of justification. It can be analyzed, criticized, and continuously improved. Second aim is to make justification itself explicit, an explicit object of analysis. People argue, persuade, bargain, threaten, and bargain again. Reasons are a coordination technology that presupposes a certain kind of participant, a being who can assent, refuse, and commit over time. I want the framework to take that seriously and to track what follows from addressing one another in that register. This yields a way to talk about legitimacy as a property of relations, something that shows up in how claims are offered and received rather than as a badge bestowed by tradition, majority, or institutional prestige. Because those aren't on any footing. It's like, okay, well, I don't think you're the king anymore. Fuck you. You know, that's it's built off of nothing. And
Yep.
so my final goal is diagnostic. I want a compact test for social apparatuses, institutions, norms, platforms, bureaucracies, markets, family structures, any mechanism that routes behavior. The question is always how that mechanism treats authorship. Does it preserve individuals as authors of commitments, or does it compress them into predictable residues that whose choices are anticipated, nudged, and harvested as output? This diagnostic stance keeps the framework usable outside of narrow politics and forces it to confront how control operates through incentives, standards, permissions, in the quiet shaping of available options. And so essentially, this can just act as a standard for everyday life and not necessarily just a political philosophy in people's relationship with the state. It's anything. Is this relationship that I have, does it respect my authorship as an individual? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, maybe it does kind of, maybe there's significant pressure on that. And this isn't to say that they're wrong for doing this, but it gives the individual the standard to go, let me judge this. Is this serving me? Is this respecting me as an author? If so, great, let's keep doing it. If not, maybe it's still worth it to be in this relationship, but at least I understand it for what it is. Or I can work on trying to fix it or remove myself from that relationship or, and so on. So that's essentially what this is for.
No, and I completely agree. I think people sometimes, particularly the napists, the liquid Zulus of the world, they get lost in the sauce and they forget the reason why we have ethics in the first place. It's a
Yeah.
relationship. It's supposed to be a reciprocal relationship that you have with people. And you're right, exactly right. I was on Jacob Wintergrad's show after he had Dave Smith and Zulu on. And I was like, I was screaming at my screen. I was on a flight from Rome at the time I was watching, and I was like, guys, it's a diagnostic. That's what it is. It's supposed to identify when a violation has occurred. It says nothing about what you do to make that right. That's a secondary issue. The justice is a whole other can of worms here, and saying you're not going to, stop your kid from being murdered by stealing a penny. That's retarded. That is so fucking dumb. And so I'm really glad you highlighted that exact word. That's the same place I'm coming from. It's a diagnostic. It's just to let us know when we've crossed a line, when we've transgressed against somebody. It says zero about what you do about it.
Yeah, we are different people. We necessarily are coming from different places. We have different minds. We have different experiences, genetics. We're speaking in a language that's completely culturally constructed in a way to just be able to communicate with each other. Of course, you're going to read the same thing as me, and you're not going to fully understand it the same way that I do. We're going to have disagreements on this. This is just an attempt to like put this together and go, hey, if you care about the same things that I do, if you care about being intelligible, if you care about coordinating with your fellow human being, if you care about avoiding conflict, this is what I think the best way is to do this.
Yeah, and one you
Um,
forgot is avoiding harm, right? So doing harm to somebody else. I think a great example of where this, because I love the fact you highlighted this is not political necessarily. There's obviously political implications, but ultimately this is relational. It's
mhm.
in simple things like hitting your kid. It's like it's totally legal to hit your kid in America, right? But this sort of framework says like, no, you're actually violating your child if you choose to hit them. Same as if you decided to hit your wife. This is a relational diagnostic that has wide ranging implications. But I think people do get sometimes too laser focused on what are the political ramifications of it, because I think that's politics is where it's most present in our lives, the most like obvious sort of situation where we're aware of that presence.
Yeah, at some point, if you are interested, this is way too long to talk about on any show. But I have a what I say article or essay rather on my blog that essentially takes this framework and extrapolates from it um, our relationship with modern governance, which I call algorithmic governance. So the name of this article or essay is Self Authorship as Political Resistance in the Age of Algorithmic Governance. And I sort of introduce our current situation in society today and then go, okay, what do we do? Here's the standard. I outline the standard. Then I go, how can we apply this standard to what we see today? And then go into that.
Dude,
Um,
send me a link. I'll link it up in the show notes.
I sent it over Twitter,
Okay, cool.
but it's about like a
Ah, there it is.
30-minute
Yep,
listen.
Substack.
Mhm.
Cool. I will add it. Well, hey, man, my brain's about broken and we're way over time already. So, pretty sure that the non nerds that are watching are probably struggling to keep up as well. So, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you online, man?
So Twitter or X, whatever. I think
I'll dead name
the
that shit for the rest of my life. I
I know
swear.
I the lifetime of this website, I think people are still gonna call it Twitter, unfortunately, for Elon, but everyone's gonna either way, it's Twitter or X, whatever, x.com/Dylan M. Allman. M is the initial for my middle name. I'd rather have Dylan Allman. However, X wants me to pay like $40 a month in order to have access to requesting a dormant handle, which may be worth it for $40. However, if you subscribe to it, if you get the dormant handle, you have to continue to subscribe indefinitely to keep that handle because if
Dear
you
God.
stop your subscription, you lose it. No chance. I'm going to keep the M in the middle of my name. um,
Man. Yeah, good news. One of the Allman brothers died. I get the handle. Like bad news. Oh, I gotta pay.
I
Fuck.
got to pay $40 for the rest of the existence of this website a month. It's ridiculous. But there's that, and then there's my blog, which nobody reads. But that is my creative outlet. That's where my most important thoughts live, or most thought out thoughts, rather. It is called Interlinked, interlinked.substack.com or interlinked.blog. That will redirect to the Substack. It is a Blade Runner themed blog, which shows how much of a nerd I can be. Um,
I don't think anyone's second guessing that after this discussion. Your cred is
um,
on display.
this is an attempt to understand the coming uh, world shift that we're all experiencing with our own personal relationship with technology and what identity looks like in this coming age of information. So,
Well, awesome, man. It's been a really fun chat. I don't know how we got from A to Z here, but it's been a hell of a ride. I really enjoyed the talk, and thanks for stopping by, dude.
of course, have a good
Yep.
one.
Later.